Well, I came here, let me make sure the sound's on and it's working well. Okay, you can hear me in the back. Somebody look conscious. Okay, okay. I am so grateful for everything about the opportunity to be here. I am loving my time here at Mount Morris. Nick and Jim have both been so gracious in introducing me. I tell my wife, it was worth the flight up here just to be introduced. So if everybody has just been so gracious, and you encourage me as a church. I'm so thankful to see what's going on in this part of the country. I've never been here before, and I'm delighted about what I carry in my heart going home about the kingdom of God. I love the things I get to share with you right now. Finding our place at the feet of Jesus. One of the things you hear young people say when they're launching sort of into career or out of school and maybe away from home and going and finding their place in the world. Finding our place. What is that? Where do I need to be? And how do I perceive where I am now in relationship to my family and where I am in relationship to God? A few years ago, just a couple of years ago, I was doing a study in the Gospels, and there was something that, you know how it is when something jumps off the page at you. You've read it before. You've known it maybe all of your life in some way or other. But for whatever reason, there is something, maybe some word, maybe it's some phrase that just jumps off of the page and it grabs you, sort of like by the lapels, and shakes you a bit and wakes you up. And you say, how did I never see this before? And that's what I get to share with you this morning, finding our place at the feet of Jesus. I want to look at a number of stories just very quickly, and stories that you know or you've heard before. Stories that are found in the Gospels about people who came in contact with Jesus. And the first one is in the story of Jairus from Mark chapter 5. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet. You'll see it in yellow on the PowerPoint, but this is the phrase, at his feet, at the feet of Jesus. He fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. The idea of falling at the feet. Jairus was a man of some stature. He was a person who was respected. He was the ruler of the synagogue. He probably was the person who organized most of the things in that community, because synagogue was not just a place you went to on Sabbath service, but it was the center of your community, the center of your people. And because of that, Jewish people feared nothing more than they feared being cast out of the synagogue. Well, Jairus is a big man in that setting. But as the story goes, he has a little daughter who is at the point of death. And it doesn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter if he is a prime minister or a president of a country. It doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters when you have a sick little daughter. You are undone. Whatever power or authority you have, whatever you can make happen in this world, you can't do anything about this right here. And so when he comes to Jesus, he falls at his feet. Those are the words I want us to notice today. And I want us to picture ourselves in their picture as we talk about these things. At the feet of Jesus. When someone comes to Jesus, when someone comes to anyone and falls at their feet, we're giving up all pride. We're giving up all standing. We're giving up all capacity. We're giving up all of our competence. There's nothing that we can do in a situation like that, and the only thing that is left is to fall at the feet of Jesus. And so Jesus, of course, heals the daughter. It's one of the great stories in the Gospels. It's a beautiful thing. But what I want us to freeze frame on is that moment where this man of authority and standing comes to Jesus, and he doesn't stand there and hold his shoulders and shake him. He doesn't even look him in the eye. He falls at his feet. The second story is of the Syrophoenician woman. Immediately, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard about Jesus and came, and look what she did. She fell at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Jesus has an encounter with her. He talks to her about her being a Gentile, and that he's really not dealing with Gentiles right now, though he's going to be opening the door of the kingdom for all people eventually. But as he talks to her, and he sort of pushes her back a little bit. When I was in graduate school, I wrote a paper on this particular text because this text bothered me so badly. It was a difficult scene, and Jesus doesn't do what we would think he would do, of just embracing the woman and saying, "Way to go, aren't you wonderful?" But I think what happens on a deeper level here is that Jesus sets this woman up to be a spiritual success. He pushes her back a bit so that she can rush forward even more. This woman, who is not a Jew, has a young daughter who has an unclean spirit. There is nothing she can do, but she's heard that this Jesus is hope. The whole world is crying out for hope. Everybody's desperate for hope. In whatever situation they're in, hope that there is a possibility that things can become better. She comes to Jesus and she falls at his feet. And our hearts are touched. Maybe our hearts are broken as we see a desperate mother from an outcast people come to Jesus on behalf of her daughter. And even if Jesus curses her, even if he pushes her back, even if he exposes that she is a Gentile, whatever Jesus might do, she doesn't care, because all that matters for her is that little daughter who is being tormented by an unclean spirit. There was a sinful woman in Luke chapter 7, and that's the way she's known in Scripture. How would you like to be known as simply the sinful man, the sinful woman? A woman of the city who she was a sinner. She brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing at his feet and weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. A woman that was a sinner, a woman that people called that. A woman that knew that this Jesus was just on a whole different plane than she was. A woman that knew that she was unworthy to be there. But she comes to Jesus and she brings what she has, this alabaster flask of ointment. And she anoints his feet, wets his feet with her tears, wipes them with the hair of her head, and kisses his feet. She comes to Jesus, and where does she go? Once again, it's not the bold or defiant look of someone who is saying, "I dare you to criticize me," or "I dare you to condemn me." But this is a broken soul who comes to Jesus, and there's nothing to do but simply linger at his feet, weeping on his feet, washing his feet, wiping his feet with her hair. She is at the feet of Jesus. Legion is one of my favorite characters in Scripture. Jesus goes across the Sea of Galilee, and he's over in the edge of Gentile country in Luke chapter 8. And when he arrives there, this man who is demon-possessed runs up to Jesus. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out and he fell down before him. And he said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." The man was demon-possessed. He's like a character out of a horror movie. He's someone that they had tried to bind with chains, and he could break them apart. He was someone that would maybe howl through the night, all through the night, crying out among the tombs. He was something the people, everybody in town knew about. Nobody knew what to do about him. Jesus comes he arrives by boat, and when he gets out of the boat, this man runs to meet him. And there's something fascinating in the Gospels about what people say to Jesus when they arrive there, when they come into his presence. There are a lot of people who are desperate. They're lame or they're blind, and they have a physical malady, and they come to Jesus. And in the Gospels, consistently, these people will come and they will call him teacher, or they'll call him rabbi, or they will call him son of David, and they will make their appeal based on that. Now, that's impressive, and that's a beautiful thing for them to say. But the demon-possessed people are different. The demon-possessed people don't come to Jesus and say, "Son of David." They don't come to him and say, "Rabbi," or "Great teacher." Demon-possessed people come to Jesus and they see a spiritual reality that the rest of us didn't see. They see right off who this is. And they say, as this man comes, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" The greatest confessions of Jesus are by the demon-possessed. And so this man comes and Jesus asks, "What's your name?" And he says, "My name is Legion, because we are many," as the demons speak to Jesus. And they beg for Jesus not to cast them away into the abyss. There's a herd of swine nearby. Jesus casts the demons into that. They run down the steep bank and into the sea. And the people who were watching the pigs, they up and they run back into the city and they tell people what's going on there. And when they come out to where this man is, they find him once again with Jesus, but he is seated now. Seated. He has clothes on. Something people couldn't keep on this man. He is seated, he is clothed, and he's in his right mind. And the people from the city, when they come out, they're more afraid of what Legion is now than they were of what Legion was before. When he was a crazy demon-possessed man, as bizarre as all of that was, they kind of had made their peace with that, and they had adjusted to it. But when they come out and they see Legion now, the former demon-possessed crazy man, they see him seated, clothed, and in his right mind, and they are more afraid than they've ever been before about him, because they realize there is a power that is greater than the power they earlier feared. There was a power that had put him in a seat, clothed him, and he was in his right mind. So it all begins again as something, this person with these special powers, but whose life was absolutely a mess. And he was tormented by these demons. And so when Jesus shows up by the Sea of Galilee, he goes to him. And when the herdsmen saw what had happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone out, he was sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind again. And they were afraid. Are you starting to catch on to the refrain? The words that we see in every one of these passages? People coming to Jesus in desperation, and we find them at the feet of Jesus. The leper in Luke chapter 17, where the lepers who had this affliction that kept them out of society and would eventually kill them, and they were unclean, and you couldn't get near other people. They'd throw rocks at you, they'd stone you to death. But this man is one of 10 people that the Lord heals and tells them to go show themselves to the priest. And this one of the lepers, when he saw that he was healed, he turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. He was a Samaritan. He was an outcast on multiple levels. He had desperately come to Jesus, and he had begged for healing just like the others. But as he's going to show himself to the priest, he sees that his skin is smooth and it's clean and it's white again. And he turns around, goes back, and what do you do when you're that grateful? What do you do when you've been given life back? What do you do when you're able to be a human being again? And this man falls on his face at Jesus' feet. At a moment like that, you're not worried about your pride. You're not worried about what anybody will think. That has gone out completely out the window. But you come back to Jesus, and there's nothing to do but collapse at the feet of Jesus, to hold the feet of Jesus, to touch the feet of Jesus, the one that you couldn't even have dared think of touching anyone before. And now you are healed, and we find ourselves at the feet of Jesus. This is a summary statement that's found in Matthew chapter 15. Great crowds came to Jesus, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And the friends that brought them, what did they do? They put them at his feet. And he healed them. And they glorified the God of Israel. So we have these stories of these individuals like Jairus and like Legion. And then we just have this summary of there are people from all over who have all kinds of problems. And if you had a friend that would take you there, they bring you. And when they bring you to Jesus, it's sort of like they just plop them at the feet of Jesus. Put them at the feet of Jesus. Where is their healing? It's at the feet of Jesus. Do you have any hope? It's going to be found at the feet of Jesus. And time again, we find this. But the most remarkable passage and the most inspirational passage at this point comes from the resurrection. In Matthew 28, and so they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. A combination that you'll find in the Gospels about the resurrection. When they go there and they find that the tomb is empty. They leave there running away. They have fear mixed with great joy. And they ran to his disciples, the women did. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And when he did, they knew who he was. And they came up and took hold of his feet, and they worshiped him. So now the risen Lord, these people who had followed him, who had dared to hope in him, who had thought he was going to change their lives and their world, and now he's been killed. And now he's risen. And you're overwhelmed by what you're facing in life. And you don't know how to explain it. You don't know how to write home about this. You are overwhelmed with gratitude and with hope and with inspiration about what life can now be. And they took hold once again of his feet. I have a question for the church this morning. Question for you. And the question is, what is our story from our time spent at the feet of Jesus? If this were in a college classroom, I'd love to just give this as an assignment at this point and say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I want you to write in a very personal way about your time at the feet of Jesus? When have you been totally without any hope at some point in your life? Maybe it's being confronted with an illness and you feel overwhelmed by it. Or maybe it's a personal challenge of relationship in some way or other. When have you gone to the Lord in prayer and felt as you were praying, I am at the feet of Jesus? All pride is out the window. All self-focus, all hope that I can take care of my needs, all that's gone. It's been stripped away by life in some way or other. And we go to Jesus, and in prayer we feel that we are at the feet of Jesus. What is our story? We could spend the next week probably just going around this room and asking, who would like to share about your time at the feet of Jesus? When were you most broken? When were you most in need? When were you most desperate before Jesus? When was a time that you were spent at the feet of Jesus? I believe that is for the church today. I think that's the beginning of evangelism. I think the message that we have to share, maybe with family, maybe with people we work with, maybe with the folks next door. But if we're wanting to talk to someone about Jesus, I think the position from which we best do that is when we are at the feet of Jesus. And when we are sharing with others our experience of Jesus was there. I needed him desperately. And I had nothing to do but beg, Lord, deliver. And at the feet of Jesus, Jesus came through. Jesus took care of me. Jesus loved me. Jesus gave me back my life, gave me back my hope. And when someone shares a story like that, there's no pride that gets in the way. And the person who needs to hear the story of Jesus, they're not being pushed away because we're so full of ourselves. What they're hearing is that I know what it's like to fall on my face and grab the feet of Jesus because that was the only hope that I had left. What is our story from our time spent at the feet of Jesus? There was a writer named Ian McLarty who was a Scottish preacher, and he's just one of my favorite preaching heroes. He lived before my time, but he trained a lot of young Scottish preachers, and one of my favorite statements of his is that Ian McLarty would tell his young preacher boys as he would send them out to preach, he would say, "Be kind to all, for all are having a hard time." Be kind to all, for all are having a hard time. He wrote a best-selling book called Beside the Bonnie Briar Bush that was published in 1894, and it was the number one bestseller in the United States in the year 1895. Something nobody in this room saw that time. But it was the best-selling book, and it's written in a very heavy Scottish brogue. With a great Scotch-Irish name like McLarty, I've always thought it was a great injustice that I didn't have a Scottish accent. You would be on the edge of your seat listening to me this morning, hanging on every word, even if you didn't understand it. And yet, but Ian McLarty in that book, Beside the Bonnie Briar Bush, he tells a story that has carried through the years of a young man who goes off to train to be a preacher. And he goes and he reads and he studies and he writes and he learns a great deal and comes back with a lot of sophistication and the little town, the rural village is very, very proud of him. He comes back and he stays with his aunt. She has a room for him there in her house. And the local village church invites him to preach on Sunday. And she's in his room one day sweeping things up, and she sees his sermon on his little desk. And so she can't resist. And she goes over and she reads through her nephew's sermon that he's going to preach that Sunday at church. And when she reads the sermon, she just begins to cry because she loves the boy so much. And she thinks so highly of him. But she reads this and she thinks the people at the local church aren't going to understand a word that this guy says. And they're going to be impressed with how smart he is. They're not going to be touched by anything that he says. And she says, you will say what's right. There's no doubt about it. And a body will be pleased with you. But oh, laddie, be sure to say a good word for Jesus. I'm convicted by that statement. That what needs to be heard is say a good word for Jesus. Say a good word for the one at whose feet we fall in desperation. We don't have anything in this world to be puffed up about, but we have an incredibly powerful message when we can share with the world that we have spent time at the feet of Jesus. We spend time now at the feet of Jesus. That we have no hope for anything else other than being at the feet of Jesus. I need to go back to my slide, however I get there. I want to close. In its essence, evangelism, I believe, is sharing a God-touched piece of one's own soul. Sharing our own experience at the feet of Jesus. And I believe that is the open door to anybody else's heart. If we want to share anything of power with them, we need to say a good word for Jesus. And we need to tell about how we came to his feet in desperation and he lifted us up. I want to close with just a mention about a man named Jim Bill McIntyre. I mentioned him in one other presentation I made here. He was a great preaching hero in my life. When I went and interviewed with the college church, the first big softball question they gave me in my interview was, who are your preaching heroes? And the first name that I mentioned was Brother Jim Bill McIntyre. And this man had preached for years for the West End congregation in Nashville. And in my church growing up as a boy, when we had a special event to celebrate, we would invite Jim Bill McIntyre to come and preach. Because when it was all over with, we would all feel like we had been in a group hug. And that this man had affirmed us and patted us on the back and had set us on our way. We were inspired. I was blessed with the opportunity to go and to be present at his funeral back in 2010. And when we walked in, they handed us a program for the funeral. And there was a theme for the day. There was a title for the funeral program. And it was from the song, I Love to Tell the Story. That's what his life was about. I love to tell the story of Jesus and his love. I want that to be on my funeral program someday. I want that to be how my life can be characterized. I want that to be what the world can say about all of us, that we love to tell the story. And it begins with this episode of when I came to the feet of Jesus. At his feet is where I want to be. And it's where I want to be when I share his message with those who so desperately need to know of a loving Savior. We're going to offer a song of invitation. We're going to sing a song of invitation, offer an invitation here this morning. If you're ready to come and to come to the feet of Jesus. That's who this community is. That's who this body is we are people who found Jesus. We came to his feet, and he lifted us up. And this morning you may be ready to be baptized into Christ. You may be being crushed by some burden in life and need to bring it before this church. You may feel like you're at the point of, I need to fall at his feet. Well, I can tell you he can be trusted, and so can this church. Whatever it is that we need to do in life this morning, may we all find ourselves at the feet of Jesus. It's my place, the place I want to be in this world. If you need to respond in any way at this time, won't you come as we stand and sing?